Thank you, yes, for having us today. We're excited to share all a few of the things, the nuggets we put into our book to help families find more nature time.
And Danette, are you seeing my?
Looks
I
great.
can see it well too. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Well, yes, welcome everyone. We're so excited. This is really our first event in Seattle since our book is coming out, and we're excited to share this. Both of us have connections to the UW community and are delighted to be here. My name is Pooja Tandon, and in addition to what Sebastian shared in the introduction, each of us thought we would just share a little bit more about what brought us to this work and what brought us together for writing this book. And you'll find these stories in a little more depth even in the book. But I grew up in India and didn't actually think of myself as a very outdoorsy person for a long time, although I spent a lot of time outdoors. I didn't go camping and hiking and didn't have all the gear growing up. But I loved being outdoors. We slept under the stars, we played outdoors. And I think when I became a mother, that's where I gravitated. And I found that it was easier to parent outdoors. And so I became very interested in studying this as part of my work as a child health researcher, as a physical activity researcher, and ended up kind of creating a whole body of scholarship around this work, around the health benefits of nature contact for children, including doing a kind of systematic review of the literature on this topic, and then got involved with local and national efforts on advocacy for increasing access to outdoor time and nature-rich spaces. And that's where connected with Danette, and we've worked on a few initiatives together and eventually came together to write this book. And yeah, I'm going to let Danette share a little bit of her story and what brought her to it.
Thank you. Yes. So I was 32 years in primary care practice at Mercer Island Pediatrics after growing up in the Pacific Northwest. And I also would not have said I was the quintessential outdoor person. Definitely spent a lot of my childhood outside exploring and raised my children that way. Found it a wonderful and delightful tool for my children and our whole family. Um, but what I was seeing in practice was a lot more demands on patients and their families for time and space to just be able to go out. And in the book, I share the story of a kindergartner who came in and rolled her eyes at me when I asked her what she liked to do outside. And I was just distraught that I didn't really have the tools to know what to do. At the same time, people and researchers like Dr. Tandon were telling us how important this was, not just because we enjoyed it, but really good for the health of children, and began to seek out other pediatricians to find out what they were doing. And through our nonprofit Best Start Washington, we created the tools for pediatric practices to be able to bring this up for families and not just give them one more thing to do as an overstressed family, go outside, but really kind of look at the other things that were keeping them from being outside. So we hope that you'll find our book and even this talk, inspirational and supportive to you as families and caregivers, teachers, to find more time outside for the children in your sphere. And uh, that when we're done here, we plan to leave enough time for questions. So as they occur to you, please write them in the chat. I'll be looking at chat answers, so please put them in the chat. And with that, let's share some things that we learned, Pooja, in this work together.
Yeah, that sounds great. And before we do that, though, we thought we would try to get all of you primed and thinking about outdoors and the importance of childhood experiences outdoors. So, would love for you to kind of think about a childhood memory, any age, when you were doing something joyful outdoors, and reflect on who you were with, why it was special, what it means for you, and just give everybody a minute or so to, if you're willing to share something briefly in the chat, and would love to see what kinds of memories are coming up for you.
Anything that first comes to mind, go ahead and just jot down a few words about that. Something that you remembered from your childhood about being joyful outdoors, maybe the people you were with. So Debbie's written that she grew up skiing, and it was special maybe because it was with her brother, paddling in the Boundary Waters with the family, camping with the family, playing on the farm with my siblings and cousins, afternoons at the beach with my family, Catskills with grandparents. These are all wonderful examples. Used a lot of my basketball skills, be outside, family bike rides, digging a hole. Don't you remember dirt when you were a little kid and really getting down in there? Yes, so many things that you're bringing up. Definitely, I love all of these because it really reflects that everybody maybe had different kinds of access: the farm, the mountain, the paddling in water, but also you were tagging other people you were with too, and that's some of the magic of this. Um, so we definitely are right with you on all of that. We believe that all children should have this opportunity, and right now it seems like they have less opportunity for some of these wonderful memories. And why it seems is because we're really upset by the why is there not as much access, because we even know even more now about how important and how much healthier and happier and more resilient children are when they've got to play and move outdoors in nature-rich environments. And there's increasing scientific evidence for this that I alluded to, and maybe Pooja, you can share some of that, the information and the science behind this.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, a few years ago, I worked with a team of researchers and trainees. Sorry, I went ahead too quickly. And we did a systematic review. So those that may not be familiar with that idea, we really tried to scour the literature, the published peer-reviewed literature on the relationship between nature contact and children's health. And we defined it broadly: physical health, mental health, learning outcomes. Started with kind of, I think, close to 10,000 articles that we combed through and eventually reviewed in more detail about 300 papers, and found that there were several areas of strong scientific evidence. And this builds on lots of work done by others as well. And for adults, certainly there's even more evidence. But focusing on the children's literature piece that we did, there were two areas that were very were kind of the strongest evidence base, and that was that living near or spending time near or in nature was good for children's mental health and for promoting physical activity. And those are both, as you can imagine, public health priorities of our time, priorities I think that any parent, caregiver, pediatrician certainly has in terms of promoting children's health, and where we see a lot of the challenges in terms of getting children moving and wanting them to have good mental health. So just kind of, and support for other areas of health as well. So we'll dive into each a little bit more. In terms of mental health, evidence for spending time, again, near or in nature, for decreasing symptoms of depression, for anxiety, for decreasing stress levels and promoting happiness. For healthy behaviors and physical health, I mentioned physical activity, but also things like sleep and even healthy eating. So when children are engaged in gardening, and sometimes schools and preschools in the studies we found have put in little gardening programs, and children are more likely to try fruits and vegetables, or engage in kind of the healthy eating habits that we would want them to be part of. And then other benefits come because of the decrease in harmful exposure. So having trees and vegetation can help reduce air pollution. And in recent years, increasing importance of heat. So, so much of the country saw extreme heat situations this past summer, last year, and it's it's been studied that having those sort of trees in schoolyards and neighborhoods and vegetation can decrease those types of exposures that can have a negative impact on health as well. So a whole range of health benefits. And I'll also mention prenatal health. There's a large study in Europe with over 70,000 pregnant people and living closer to green spaces was associated with fewer low birth weight babies and preterm births. So really kind of from the whole lifespan of preterm, from prenatal health through childhood and adolescence, which is what we focus on in as pediatricians, but certainly into older years, there are so many benefits of spending time in nature. Oh, and vision. There's just so many. Yeah. There's there was a I think a report that came out that specifically called out the relationship of outdoor time being beneficial for preventing or delaying the progression of myopia or nearsightedness, and lots of large studies, especially from Asia, that support that health outcome. So how does it work? Why does, and I'm sure you can kind of imagine any or all of these as being part of the mechanism of how being in nature or being near nature can promote health. And it really, is probably multifactorial, and it probably depends on what health outcome you're focusing on. Biophilia is a concept that's been around for a few decades. And the idea there is that as humans, we have an innate connection to nature in our natural world. And so therefore, spending time in it is good for our health. And connected to that is this idea of awe. And we talk about that. And there are researchers who focus on this idea of being in immersive nature settings and how that can be so good for our mental health and our sense of kind of restoring our capacity to focus on things and our cortisol levels in terms of stress reduction. There, if you're familiar with this idea of forest bathing, kind of again, spending time among trees, that these trees actually produce substances that are meant to protect them. But when we inhale them as humans, they've been found to increase our immune function, specifically these natural killer cells that are good for our immunity. And so that's a practice that is often heard of in Japan, but even is possible in the Seattle area. We talked about physical activity and all the range of health benefits that come from that, clean air, heat mitigation. And then I have to call out that, especially for children, but likely for people of all ages, there are opportunities to spend time with others when we are outdoors, when we're in parks and spending time in nature. And that is getting a lot of attention lately as we think about the kind of pandemic of loneliness and the decaying social fabric of many of our communities, and how important public spaces, outdoor spaces, rejuvenating spaces can be for our individual health and the health of our families and communities. And then, of course, as pediatricians, we think a lot about development, and I'm going to have Danette maybe share a bit more about how nature is good for child development at all the ages.
Yes, thank you. Definitely, this is one of those things that really gets pediatricians excited. Being in nature can help treat some symptoms, maybe that attention restoration for an ADHD patient, or certainly reducing stress and anxiety. But it's also preventative in that better physical fitness and physical activity, maybe improved immune function. And the developmental milestones and the life acquisition skills that children get are also so important to the success and happiness and resilience of children as adults. But it starts when they're born. And so what we've found and heard is that, of course, the natural settings inspire exploration and awe and imagination, and those traits then support development and acquisition of skills. So if you take a minute, just think about motor skills, gross motor and fine motor. Small children need practice and encouragement to grow these skills, and uneven ground and loose parts like leaves and rocks and sticks are so compelling to them and give them the opportunity to practice developing these skills. When children get older, of course, they're already walking and writing and whatnot, but they need this unpredictable, non-curated, maybe even risky time in nature to keep their muscles strong. And not just the muscles that we're using for soccer or swimming. Those can get overused sometimes for children who specialize in one sport all year round, but nature gives our kids an opportunity to use all their muscles and keep them all growing and developing. And then another developmental skill that comes through childhood is, of course, language skills and all the communication that nature inspires. Naming things a baby sees or hears. You'll be mentioning the clouds, the flowers, the birds. Listen to that bird. Wonder if that dog is in the next neighborhood. Think about all the planning for older children and the communication skills that they have to develop as they bring their friends along or plan things in nature to meet up at a park maybe, or create a new flashlight tag game for their neighborhood. And of course, as you all just told us in the chat, nature is the ideal setting to grow social emotional skills. So we know that relational health built in safe, stable, nurturing environments is the foundation for strong mental health. And so this time invested in outdoor play with your child or your child's play with peers is so important outdoors. Free play, risky play, foundational motor skills, all of these things in one place. If you can just get outdoors and let your child and you together with them, maybe for part of it, enjoy the outdoors. So we talked about the health benefits, but maybe Pooja, you can share with us a little bit more about what we know, or we can maybe switch the topic and say, well, why isn't everybody outdoors all the time? What's keeping us from getting our kids outside?
Yeah, that sounds good. And I also want to mention that the photos that you're seeing are, many of them are members of our families, and photos that we've included in the book as well. So we love just sharing them with you here as well. Yes, I'm going to switch over to the topic. I wanted to mention this one thing as we're talking about resilience and resilience across the ages.
Oh, yeah.
Through, this came out just right in the middle of kind of the COVID pandemic. The Surgeon General in California released this sort of diagram with a report on stress busters and responses to adverse childhood adversity. And COVID-19 was a unique societal stressor, but stressors exist all the time and across the ages. And it's an example of how this is being recognized nationally and in a lot of other settings, that time in nature, here, access to nature is one of these 7 kind of stress busters that have been identified, along with others, in ways of promoting health and promoting resilience throughout our lives. And which makes it especially critical and relevant that all of us have that access to nature, to have opportunities to get to nature, to have time in nature safely, to not just feel physically safe, but psychologically safe in those settings. And we know that that does not exist for everyone. We wanted to just explore a little bit, and if you're willing, again, in the chat, to offer your thoughts about challenges or barriers that might make it difficult for you to spend time in nature, for your family, anybody in your family or friend group. What kinds of barriers do you have come up? So even when we know that, and we acknowledge this as as parents, as pediatricians, we hear about from families of what types of challenges they may encounter in doing things, even when they know that they're good for us or they're good for their family members. So we'll take a kind of pause and again, give you a minute to drop in the chat kinds of challenges or barriers that might make it difficult to get outdoors.
When we go to pediatric practices, as part of the research, we always ask families about their barriers, and the number one barrier that they list for not going out in the past week has been weather, which is, yep, and there's the number one thing that showed up on our chat. Don't want to go outside when it rains, even though our rain is like that misty little rain that is barely getting you wet, but you're not alone in that. But when you think about weather, we love the quote, there's no bad weather, you just have a need for better clothes. And also now with climate change, we're starting to have to teach families, and they teach us how they do manage this, but safety in weather. Is it too hot? Is the heat index now too high for children to be outside, or the air quality too high, or the air quality too poor during wildfire season? And so we definitely have to brainstorm with families about that. With the other thing that comes up for children and having the right kind of clothes is they're growing all the time. Those boots that you bought last week are now too small, and you might not really have the money to go buy another new pair of boots. So really helping families find the gear that they need, with suggestions about thrift shops or the online marketplaces now that have free materials. A lot of the outdoor preschools have gear libraries where you can check out snowsuits and use them for a time. So definitely with the weather, there are going to be times when you shouldn't be outside because of safety, but definitely get out there even when it's raining, and try to make yourself as comfortable as possible. In the chat, I saw the safe access. Someone mentioned lack of sidewalks, so the danger in getting to a park perhaps, or a natural area, the park itself maybe not being as safe. And so definitely brainstorming with families about that. There's a concept called park activation, and you can now look on Google for many parks and find out what kinds of activities they might have scheduled there, or when other groups are in the park that make you feel like it's going to be safer, or there's maybe staffing at the park to help you with that. The bus system now is taking people from town to trails, and helping people with transportation to get to more awe-inspiring nature. But if it's just up the road, and the complete lack of green space is another thing, where we don't have a park within a 10-minute walk of everybody in the United States, which is one of the goals, of course, that the Trust for Public Land has set for themselves. So looking for green space around libraries or places of worship, and maybe even just bringing some nature inside. I saw it on here several times on your list of barriers that you were brainstorming for us. Time. It was the number 2 in all of our chats with families. We don't really have a set recommendation for how much time a child needs to be in nature to get the benefits, but some every day would be nice. And so trying to fit that into a busy schedule, we encourage families to think outside the box a little bit, maybe making running your errands by walking to them or biking, so you're a little bit outside, and talking on the way about the nature you see. What about asking the other caregivers in your child's life to help with some nature time? Does your child care have enough outdoor time for the babies and toddlers? And is there some access in that outdoor time to some natural settings? What about your school? Is the schoolyard a big asphalt play field, or is there some natural areas that they can play with? And do they even still get their recess? Dr. Tandon worked very hard with a whole coalition of people to make sure that there was a law passed, and next year there's mandatory recess that schools are going to have to provide. And then again, taking things indoors if you really just can't get out, or taking your usual indoor things outside. So picnics and music practice, do your homework out there, make play dates outside, and of course, bringing nature inside. Bird watching from a window or a porch, night sky gazing, follow the moon phases, bring plants in, maybe an indoor garden. What about reading about nature? And together as a family, planning that maybe once a month you can get out to a park and planning what you might do there once you get there. In the chat, I also saw, of course, people with disabilities and some of the unique challenges. In the book, we go into great detail about that for several conditions, including medical conditions that might limit a child's access to nature, or make a family feel a little less good about letting their child be out and run free. And so definitely, if you're thinking about this, children with chronic health conditions, take a look at our chapter on that in the book. 27% of children have chronic health conditions, so this is not unusual. And we all know that that there are intermittent times when we all might not be as ambulatory, maybe recovering from a broken bone or something like that. So even more children, this can be something that keeps you out of nature. When you're thinking about this, we highly encourage you to definitely look for those accommodations that make nature not just accessible, but inclusive. So yes, the path might lead right up to the playground area, but if it doesn't have the playground area where all children can play together, how is that really accessible? So it does take a little bit of work. In the pictures there's of course some attempts that parks and other outdoor spaces have made for children who might love the swing but now are too big for the usual swings, children who are easily upset by a lot of activity and noise, little sensitive neurodiversity. So looking for those places in a park or a nature setting where you can go to be quiet and collect yourself. And certainly beaches and people with limited mobility and how they're going to get there. We encourage people to partner with the whole healthcare provider and team. The child that takes care of the child, your physical and occupational therapist may have the best ideas, or maybe it is the cardiologist who comes up with the plan. But really check it out. Sometimes we found families limited children more than they needed to, more than they had to for safety. And we want you to be out there as much as you can. And we're excited by all of these community groups that are making parks and nature centers and transportation and activation of park space and natural spaces more accessible to children who have health conditions or disabilities. Let's see, maybe Pooja, you can talk. I mentioned the schoolyards and really making sure your childcare and schools have natural areas for your child to play in. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about this as such a great strategy for health equity.
Yeah, this is something I've learned a lot about since becoming more familiar with the Trust for Public Lands initiatives around the country. They're a national nonprofit that builds parks and trails and renovates schoolyards into these kind of more green spaces. The top picture there is a community schoolyard that opened up earlier this year in Tacoma. So, and the idea there is that in many communities, there's just no land to put in a park. And 1 in 3 people in our country do not live within a 10-minute walk of a park, which is roughly about half a mile. So, where do you get this park and green space? And we know for regular access, for daily access, you need those nearby nature. It's not going to be possible to go into the wilderness all the time or as easily for children. And so schools are just such a critical space for that. And if those schoolyards, every school has a schoolyard typically, and especially elementary schools are often in walking distance to many people who live there, or at least closer access. Imagine if instead of asphalt and plastic, they had trees and plants and vegetations and gardens. And then on top of that, imagine if through shared use agreements, which is a partnership between the schools and often the parks department, they could be open after hours to the community, so evenings and weekends. Then suddenly there is park access where there previously wasn't one, and especially if these efforts are targeted to communities with less of that park and green space access, facing park inequities, which is often for structural and historical reasons based on racist policies like redlining, we can now increase those practices. So I think that if you're somebody who maybe has lots of access to parks and green space in your community, but feel inspired to advocate, this is one strategy of thinking about, how can schools become the hub for providing more access. Community schoolyards is a way towards that. Supporting community organizations and parks and coalitions that are making park equity and play equity a priority is another way to do that. And yeah, and then I wanted to just also mention the kind of summer camps and after school extracurricular, all those organizations that, and some of them are geared towards children with special healthcare needs, or may have specific focus and ability to support children. The second photo here in the middle is from the Apex summer camp, which some UW faculty are part of, and it's a special summer program for children with autism and ADHD, and they just have wonderful programming and high staff ratios that are well trained to support children. And the third picture is from Bellevue's, the downtown park there, and they have some features that make it more inclusive. I saw one question, Danette. I wonder if you want to take it now before we go further, but Chloe asked that in the absence of safety concerns, is there a limit on how much outside time is too much? So they have a toddler who wants to be outside constantly to the exclusion of other activities.
I think that's very common. I totally was grabbing that question when we got to this, because little children really delight in being outside. And I remember thinking how frustrating it was that my toddler threw a tantrum that we had to go back in. And did I even want to go back outside, because I knew that tantrum was coming and had to think of ways around that. I don't think there's a limit at all, as evidenced by the outdoor preschools and forest schools that have popped up all over the world. We have several in the greater Western Washington area, and those children really are outside every single day and all day. It's childcare. We even in this state were one of the first to have childcare licensing rules be made for outdoor preschools. There were so many hours that it went beyond preschool. It was now childcare. So definitely, but you're a parent and you've got a lot of things going. So I think, you just have to keep in mind how much time do you have to be out there to supervise or make this happen. And definitely, depending on the age of the child, so real young toddlers don't have a concept of time. So saying we're only going to play for an hour won't mean a thing to them. They'll still be very upset when the hour is done. But older kids, 3 and over, start to get a better sense of time, and you can do that. It's also good, I think, to talk about what you're going to do when you go back inside and make it sound kind of fun, to string them along when you're ready to go back in, and 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 lots of warnings, oh, in 5 minutes we're going to go in, and remember, we're going to color in that new coloring book with the markers you got, and that'll be fun too. Or I'm going to read your favorite book, or whatever it's going to be, or you can help me make lunch for everybody. But strategizing like that, and it's the time is limited just by life. Pooja, do you have a better answer?
No, I think that's great. I think one thing I'll add is, when I think about the nature-based preschools or outdoor preschools, so I think, maybe part of this question where, you're asking, like, to the exclusion of all other activities, like, is there something else that they're missing because they want to be outdoors? And one way to think of it is that, well, you can do a lot of things outdoors, and that outdoor time can be divided into sort of structured and unstructured. If you want to sort of think about it in that way, and the guidance for early childhood education settings and for preschoolers is that for movement and outdoor time, you could have a balance of that kind of structured, adult-led, and free play and child initiated, because they're both valuable. Like, there are times where, I mean, so many reasons that children need to sort of figure things out on their own and come up with their creative play and interact with peers. And we don't want all of their time to be directed by adults, which, unfortunately happens a lot, especially as they get older and they're all in sports and structured activities, and very little of maybe wandering around and playing like maybe many of us did when we were children. So we want that child initiated play. And there's a role for maybe especially as they get into the school age years, for adult instruction on things. And those are both possible in the outdoor settings. And you can read outdoors, and you can do outdoor, art and eat and all of those things. So I think the natural environments can be conducive to all of those. So if the concern is like there are other things that are not happening, I think there may be creative ways of bringing those outdoors. And then the other thing, as we were kind of talking about this, that came to mind that I thought may be worth mentioning, like, is there any harm to be, like, is there a downside to nature time? And are there people who shouldn't be outdoors? And, there are very few. I think for most, like the vast majority of population across the ages and health conditions, more outdoor time, more nature contact, more movement is good for you. If there are some health conditions that you may want to check in with your healthcare team about, certain heart conditions, somebody with a seizure disorder in terms of safety around water, and how you would, or children with cognitive disabilities, that you may want to, have other precautions in place for safety. Extreme weather conditions, you may need to kind of curtail how much time you spend outdoors. For children with asthma and allergies, you may need to make sure their kind of medication regimen and plan of where they're going and how much time they're spending is optimized. But beyond that, most children, most people, being outdoors, moving outdoors is wonderful and good for health. And for everyone else, there can be modifications and adjustments made so that they too can benefit from time outdoors.
That's great. Thank you for moving the slide. I was going to say, I think mentioning nature allies and mentors is really important, because it was such an important part of us realizing how important nature was to us, even though we weren't outdoorsy. So tell us more about this.
Yeah, and this is this idea of, sometimes our challenges, and some of these came up, I mean, even in terms of, having time or safety concerns, or even just, somebody in the family unit that is not feeling particularly outdoorsy, and that can be apparent because of, your experiences or how you grow up or what you're comfortable with, or a child who, like Dr. Galassi's patient who, was just rolling her eyes at the idea of being outdoors or outdoorsy. We love this idea of, kind of like tapping into your village. I think as anyone who's taken care of children, young children, as parents, grandparents, know that you can't do it alone. And so thinking about, well, we've talked about kind of preschools and schools and caregivers and camps and kind of other, professional adults in your life, but friends and family, thinking about nature allies as people who are willing and ready to get out there with you, to try some new things or just go on a walk, and nature mentors as people who, maybe just know a little bit more than you about a certain activity. They've done the backpacking trip and what gear to bring and how to start a fire or how to pack. And those were people that definitely helped me as we went on our first camping and backpacking trips. People who've skied, people who know how to mountain bike or know where there's some great parks that they can kind of take you to. And think about your role as a potential nature ally or mentor for your friends and family, your kids' friends who've maybe never, done an activity that is so easy and comfortable for you. Is there a role that you can play in getting them outdoors as well? Would you add anything, Jeanette?
No, I think that's just so important to kind of think outside the box and to grow your outdoor skills and to share your outdoor skills. Definitely good, sound advice. We already mentioned some of this, that not only did as parents ourselves did we enjoy the outdoors, but really it made parenting a little easier too, and definitely more fun. And yes, there were little hiccups like the tantrum because they didn't want to go back inside, or just no time and being overscheduled. But we definitely want to make sure that everybody has that access, and that as trusted healthcare providers, that we're getting that message to families about how important this is for a child's health and development.
And one thing I'll add, as now I have teenagers now, and Jeanette has a grandchild who's, so sort of raised children. One thing, although a lot of our focus and our photos have been about younger children, so we do talk about in this, and it's been fun for me to reflect on how those traditions and experiences when our children were little, even if they didn't seem like they were loving it all the time, or especially in those early teen years, kind of rolled their eyes at going on a family hike. It's been remarkable to me, and I've seen this with other kids too, like they go off to college and then they come back and they want to go on a hike, or they're planning some sort of outdoor bonfire with their friends. And so I think that, I think about all the skills they're learning along the way, and the connection and the opportunities to just, connect with them in those years when sometimes that parent-child connection can be a little bit strained, has been really neat to see. And so this idea of the job of parenting a little easier, both in those crazy little kid years, but I think there's been something special about seeing that over the decades and the teenage years as well. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, I think not only the culture of your family, but your entire extended family and the culture that you grew up in and came from is also often tied to outdoor adventures. Again, you all mentioned several of them in the opening reflection about what you did with your family. So thinking about how your culture has also influenced your ideas and activities related to outdoor and nature. We've got, maybe just let people take a minute to think about that. We're running out of time for questions. And so it's nice to learn about other cultures, I would say, as well. As you think about your own, think about others you've heard about, and those opportunities to join in them. I've been so impressed with the Indigenous communities offering community open to the community experiences in the outdoors, maybe clean environmental restoration or sharing their culture. And I always look for those. They're so much fun and fascinating. And that's one culture outside my own that I really respect as a nature mentor as well.
Yeah, I think in the interest of time, we may not necessarily kind of have everyone put into the chat here, but one thing that we've learned, I've loved learning about in researching this book, is that all of the different traditions from around the world that families and communities in which families and communities sort of celebrate nature or celebrate seasons and practices and traditions of child rearing that include nature so seamlessly. So would just encourage you to look into those and connect with those when possible.
You had previously mentioned also, Pooja, that thinking about ourselves as adults, grandparents, parents, teachers, and how good it is for us. And our barriers might be different than the child's. Someone mentioned sore knees as a barrier to getting outside, but maybe, again, brainstorming, where can I get that super nearby nature? Can I sit out on the porch? Can I get to that little stretch of green space in the middle of the road, the two sides of the road, something closer because of the knees or whatever it's going to be. But look for nature contact for yourself as well. And it is important to fill your resilience cup as well as a parent and teacher and caregiver.
Yeah,
so
one thing that maybe we wanted to just share with you before we wrap up and make sure we leave some time for questions is something that we're doing about this that we've been excited about, and Jeanette and I have been collaborating, gosh, maybe for 4 or 5 years now in trying to put together resources and tools for primary care clinics and pediatricians to prescribe nature, but not just like, you should do this, here's an extra thing for 20 minutes a day, but really making it part of a conversation and identifying and problem solving with each family what nature time can look like for them. And so this is a project that we have a pilot going in 6 clinics in Washington State, hope to expand more, where the pediatrician or pediatric primary care clinician, during those checkups that children go to regularly, they get a little bit of information, some guidance, and a nature toy as part of their visit. Jeanette, I don't know if you want to say anything more about this work.
Yeah, and if you want to read more about it, you can go to our website. But it's been super popular. The kids get a bug jar or a magnifying glass, a kite, all kinds of different kinds of nature toys. And the parents get more information and support, and they get to talk about what hardship they're having in finding nature time, and they brainstorm together with the clinic. So it's been very, I don't know, it fills my cup to do this project as well. It's been lots of fun, and people love it.
And it's part of, I think, interest that we're seeing, locally, regionally, nationally, and especially from the pediatrician community. Jeanette and I were just at our kind of national annual meeting of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and we're working on a policy statement and other work to really elevate the importance of nature contact, of access to nature as a way of promoting health and health equity around the country.
Definitely, pediatricians and other medical professionals are banding together who have this idea that it's important to promote nature contact for their patients' health. And that's been exciting to grow that at the American Academy of Pediatrics as well.
Yeah, so we're at our last slide, and we want to thank all of you for being here. We want to thank all of the, all of our collaborators and partners and those that helped us be able to put a lot of this information into this book, which is officially out October 15th. We confirmed it is available at the UW University bookstore, so you can check it out there or through the link. Yeah, it looks like we have a little bit of time, so happy to take questions in the chat for anybody.
Go ahead. Yeah, type your questions in there. Pooja, one question that came flying by in the middle of a reflection was someone wanted to know how you got involved with the Trust for Public Land.
Yeah, so it was actually, so the community schoolyards that I mentioned and that photo from Tacoma, that was the initial way that I got involved, more as in my kind of research capacity. And I partnered with the local Office of Trust for Public Land on a grant application to do some of the evaluation of looking at the impact of transforming a schoolyard on children's physical activity and other health outcomes. And then yeah, that relationship kind of led me to being able to apply for a position there. So they have a opening as a health director, and so I'm doing that as kind of part of my job, while also at staying at UW as I'm an associate professor here. But yeah, I think it's been really neat to see the different ways that pediatricians and other healthcare practitioners and public health folks are getting involved with really kind of interdisciplinary because that's what it is. I mean, we have to work with parks agencies and mental health professionals and urban planners and policymakers and educators to think about all of the ways that nature contact can it can be more equitably accessible, and that people have things to do when they get there.